Alright, we're going to be looking at a tier list here of all the weapons, all the aspects, but we're going to be looking at it from the perspective of how good are they at completing 32 fear and going beyond that. So the aspects that are going to be ranked the highest here, we're talking like 40, 50 fear, right? Is that what they're able to accomplish? Are they the best at that? For everything else, it's going to fall below, 32, 35, maybe creeping up to 40. But we'll see kind of as we go along. So at this point, I've completed 32 fear with all the aspects, either the surface or the underworld, sometimes both. I've pushed some of these things beyond that. I think I've got a really good handle on how these aspects need to be used at high fears. So let's go. Let's start. Let's jump in with Melinoe's Axe. So I'm going to be dropping into B. Now, reason being, I just think the axe aspect is incredibly strong. If you've seen me play with it, I talk about this a lot. Just the base kit of the axe, let's forget any effects from any aspects right now, is very, very strong. And the biggest reason for that is the Omega attack. So the Omega attack giving you that whirlwind effect. You're going to hit all enemies around you. You're going to deal a lot of damage. It's pretty cheap. And the biggest thing you're able to do with it is charge it up. Let's say you're using the controller. You hold down X, charge it up, and then just slide your thumb onto the A button, and you can dash ahead and then still unleash the whirlwind. It gives you a lot of control over your character. Being able to hit in all directions like that, you're going to clear out rooms fast. It also means anybody who's approaching from any direction, if they don't have armor, they're going to instantly become staggered, and the reach on that is quite far. So there's just a ton of utility in that to begin with that I think all axe aspects do really, really good at 32 fear and beyond. So Melinoe's aspect, what does it do? Well, right now, after the changes, it gives you additional health and additional attack power. So your basic attack is going to get upwards of plus 35 attack power, and you're going to get 35 health. So what is the attack power good for? Like I said, I think the Omega attack is the way to build any axe kind of right off the start. Charon is a bit of an exception to that. So you get a bit of a benefit of just being able to kill stuff faster earlier. Sometimes it's going to end up equating to a little bit more damage depending on what hammers you get. If you get increased attack speed, maybe it can overtake the efficacy, the clear speed of the Omega attack. But it does... it takes some time to actually get there. So I don't think the attack is something you really want to focus on. It's more something if you're out of magic, or if you're doing that first sort of wind-up attack to then hold down the Omega attack, you'll get a little bit more damage off of that. Just take it for what it is. It's kind of beneficial, kind of cool. But I wouldn't recommend building towards it unless that's just kind of how the boons fall. And on the health side of things, obviously, health being good, you don't die. That's pretty neat. It's going to make sure that you get more health back for every death defiance. But one of the things with health that I think is very underrated at high fears is if you're using the Strength Arcana card, it's a percentage threshold of when you drop below a certain percentage of health, 30% of health, I believe it is. You're going to end up taking less damage and doing more damage. Well, the higher your health is, the higher that threshold is. So just having that extra max health right off the bat, very, very good. And you can do some kind of cool setups. Like if you don't want to run with something like the pin at a very high fear setup, you might have to do that on the surface. I do that a lot if you're doing like 40 plus fear. You just have the pin in the first area. But if you have a little bit more health to work with, that plus Phrenos, it's going to allow you to actually equip something else. Maybe you go with the Chaos Keepsake. If somehow you have a high fear setup where you're not running the Onion, maybe you can actually pick a God boon. There's a few different things you could do, but that extra health, it does have a number of different utilities, things to take advantage of. It's a lot on just that axe, but a lot of that's going to carry over to our next axe, Charon's axe, which I'm going to put into A for now. So everything I just said about the axe still applies in the early parts of running Charon's Axe. You're still going to want to just be like Omega attacking right off the bat. And a big reason for that is that when you do the combination that Charon's Axe is asking for, you're trying to drop the cast and then use your special to blow it up, right? But you have to move over to enemies, drop the cast, often move back so you don't get hit, and then charge up a special and drop it. For one, that's slow, and two, it's dangerous. At higher fears, you almost need to pick 40% increased enemy speed, and the charge up and drop and all that is a very time-consuming activity. And you don't need that much damage right at the very start of runs. At the start of runs, your whirlwind is just fine, especially if you end up getting an attack boon on it. Instead, what you want to do, you want to build towards a cast that you can throw out. That's going to reduce a bunch of that time of the whole setup. And then if you can get, say, a hammer that reduces the cooldown or the speed of getting your special off, that's going to be huge. Yeah, and then eventually you'll get your special hammer. That's going to help on like bosses, stuff like Cerberus, stationary enemies, the sirens. You can just absolutely nuke them. Very, very powerful aspect once it gets online, but it really is asking so much. You want to get that attack at the start, then you want to get a cast and a special, and you want to be able to throw out the cast. It's asking for a lot, especially if you're running the Onion. It's hard to get all those pieces together, so that's why I've got it in A. It's just like, requires so much setup before it's amazing, but it is really strong. Once it's online, it's very, very good. I can see some pretty special things being done with Charon's Axe. And finally, we got Thanatos, his scythe. I gotta put it up in S. This one actually leans into the whirlwind attack of the axe. You're going to get the extra critical damage on your Omegas, and your regular attack's going to be faster. I don't think, even if you crank up all your attack speed to make it just so crazy, it's pretty fun. I still don't think it competes with a increased critical chance on your Omega attacks. You can run the Arcana card, plus charge it all the way up to 13%, and that'll get you 18% chance to crit on every tick of your whirlwind. It's insane. It does so much damage. It's really, really easy to use. And then, yeah, just having that increased attack speed to actually build up your crit chance, it does a pretty good job while you're doing that. So very, very easy aspect to run. It's utilizing the most powerful part of the axe, which is that whirlwind attack, and it does a very good job of like high clear speeds and damage. Like, it's good against bosses, it's good against in your regular encounters against lots of enemies. You're just dealing high base damage without any boons. It's got it all, so I gotta drop it into S here. So that's it for the axes. I think a very, very powerful weapon. But we're on to the daggers, the knives, starting with Melinoe's aspect. This one I'm going to drop into C. So first of all, the knives, they're pretty strong on their own. They're a good base kit. You attack fast. Some things can get a lot of bonus damage off of those fast attacks. Melinoe's daggers taking advantage of increased backstab damage. It's fine. You know, it's easy enough to get backstab damage, so easy enough to take advantage of what it has to offer. But really, there's not a ton in terms of like hammers and boons that are going to put this over the top. I think it does an okay job around that 32, 35 fear mark, but as you're pushing higher and higher, it just falls off. It doesn't have that much potential to be fast, to just melt bosses down, even with the right kinds of builds. Where it is good is that this aspect doesn't rely on magic at all. You can actually just, right from the onset, say, I'm not going to be concerned with magic. Take the vow that just drops your magic down to 0% when you enter a room. Let it prime as much magic as possible, right? Take that vow as well. Make sure you fill up a row so that your You're going to get increased chance of epics. I think it's Divinity is the Arcana card that you get 20% increased chance of epics. So you prime even more magic. Like, who cares, right? And then you're running the Huntress, so you're dealing that extra damage. Just don't worry about it at all. The Onions as well, something that doesn't really get in the way because you're just okay with sort of your base setup. While it doesn't have that ability to push super high fears very easily, it does have a really good floor with that. So now you can not take a vow that's going to give you extra damage, you know, have you take an extra damage, or maybe you're going to allow yourself to heal a little bit. You've got more flexibility with the vows than with a lot of other aspects. So for that reason, I think it's not a bad aspect for your first 32 fear clear, or if you're going for just 32 with everything. But yeah, just going to fall off later on. Next, we've got Artemis here. The dramatic effect while I drink some water. I'm going to drop this into A as well. I think a little bit below Charon's Axe. I think it does have a lot of potential. So you get a very, very fast Omega attack with it. And there is a singular hammer that's going to increase the damage of that by an insane amount. When you parry, you also get, like, what is it, 9 hits with increased crit chance. You can get those Omega attacks dealing like 2,000 plus damage with just like one hammer and an average attack boon. And then you can just spam it like crazy, right? Get the parry and then just Omega attack again and again and again. So it has the potential to clear very fast, to just melt bosses. Yeah, just a very, very strong aspect. It is quite dependent, I find, though, on that hammer. If you get other hammers, it's okay. You know, get some increased backstab damage, something like that. It's fine. The special hammers you just really don't care about. You don't want to be forced into them. So it doesn't have a lot of consistency at just any sort of general run. You do have to be somewhat lucky in targeting and getting that one hammer. But if everything falls in place, very, very good. And then, yeah, the parry effect, quite strong as well. You can parry, as far as I know, just about everything in the game. So if you know, Kronos is doing some bullshit move you don't like, you can just prepare, get the parry down, be invulnerable for 1 second, spam a whole bunch of Omega attacks, push a bunch of damage. I actually think both of these, and I want to say Artemis, has the potential to go up into that S. I just haven't quite seen it get there yet. I want to believe, I really want to believe that this could actually get into S. I think we're probably going to see some pretty cool stuff with it. Cool builds, cool setups. But just for now, I've got it in A as something that, yeah, can still push very, very high fears. But I'd like to play with it some more. And then right after that, we've got Pan. Pan, I'm also going to put into A, but I'm going to put it just below Artemis here. So Pan plays a lot differently. This thing is going to be taking advantage of your special. You drop the cast, shoot off your Omega special, and every dagger is going to seek out whatever's in that cast. Now, there's a handful of hammers that make this much, much better. You've got the knives that return, right? Hook knives, I think it's called. Spiral knives, where now you get up to 16 of them. Shoot out in all directions, but they'll still come back to seek out enemies. You can deal a lot of damage. And I think it's very, very easy to get 32 fear with it. For the most part, you're not having to increase enemy health. Maybe a teensy bit of damage that you're receiving. You can get kind of whatever build. You can go with the Onion and just fall into any sort of special. It's still good. Obviously, it's better with some specials than others. And as well, it's not that magic dependent. Kind of like Artemis. Artemis doesn't require a lot of magic. Pan doesn't require a ton. It's convenient if you get something like Born Gain. But even like Hearth Gain is just fine. A little bit of extra magic, or just getting extra magic pots as you go throughout. Usually that's enough to get almost full efficacy out of it, even in a boss fight, because it will just melt single targets. There's two real downsides to this, keeping it from going up into that S. The first one of those being the individual knives, they don't always behave exactly like you'd like. So if you get spiral knives, 16 knives, it's like, wow, that's amazing. Against someone like Cerberus, you can tuck up nice and close, shoot out all 16, and see them close in on Cerberus. But when you're in like an encounter with tons of enemies, they're all scattered about, they're somewhat unpredictable. Like sometimes on one side, if you're too far away, they're just not close enough to actually seek out enemies. Sometimes they'll hit pieces of the terrain, or they'll hit enemies that you weren't really hoping to hit, and you just don't really get the effect of it that you like. The other thing is, its maximum damage potential in those rooms, I think, really tends to fall off. Great with single target, but if I have to put in vows to, yeah, increase their health, and then you've got those free, like, protective damage ticks or whatever, the blue hearts on enemies, it's really, really tough to just get through a whole room and not take damage, because to do that, you have to put yourself in a dangerous position. You got to be right in the mix with all these enemies, and if they're not getting staggered from your daggers, big problem. So it ends up being hard to deal that much damage that fast and not die in the process. This here, we're talking about like 40 plus fear, but up to that sort of 40 fear, I think it does a very good job. So it's a very strong aspect. I just don't see it being like one of the top aspects in the game right now. Definitely one of the easier ones to get 32 on, though. Okay. Now we're going to the flames. Everybody's favorite ice cream cones. I think everyone thinks that these are S, right? Okay, maybe not. I am going to drop these at D. I think they're probably not as bad as a lot of people make them out to be. First thing is the attack on them got buffed a lot in the last patch. So even if you ignore Melinoe's effect on this, which is keeping the Omega specials around for longer, if you were to just build around the attack and just kind of mash that, it's very fast. It does a lot of damage. It's actually, I would say, one of the better aspects for zero fear. Very easy to learn. You're mobile. They're safe. It does enough damage now. And with the reduced magic cost of the Omega attacks, quite strong. I'll also add, for all of these aspects, I highly recommend remapping cast a left trigger if you're playing on a controller, and that's because you can hold down any of the Omega channels and still drop the cast at the same time. Less important for EOS, obviously, because it's going to interrupt your sort of channeling process when you get the Omega attack off, but very, very important for these two. Try it out. I just leave it there at left trigger now. Anyway, so yeah, I think the attack, it's quite good, but it's another one of those things that falls off. Once I'm getting to 32, I'm not getting whatever selection of boons that I want. Do I have to go with the onion? Enemies are faster, and now my channeling movement speed is a little pathetic. It kind of lags behind. It's still pretty bad. It doesn't feel great. And the reason why Melinoe's aspect doesn't get any higher than this, when you channel your Omega special, you get those big balls surrounding you hitting stuff. They actually do pretty good damage. You can do some substantial damage with them, but they're not staggering enemies. And if they're not staggering enemies, you lose that safety that you had with the weapon if you were just spamming attacks. Once again, you've got to be right close in the middle of combat to take advantage of everything. But you're moving slow. It's kind of like this awkward dash while you're channeling. You're going to end up just taking a ton of damage, being that close and not staggering. It's also very convoluted to see what's going on, and I think that's the big issue there. So it is doable. You can do it at 32 fear. Like I've done it myself. It's fine, but you're going to really struggle as you increase, especially beyond 32. I just don't see it having a high ceiling there. And then we go to Moros. Moros, I think, is a bit better. I would actually put it a little bit above the daggers here. It's a similar thing. Generally, how you're going to be using this, not all the time, but generally, you're going to get your Omega special off. You'll have those balls surrounding you, and then hold down the attack, and they'll just hit the balls as they're going out and explode, and you're going to get a bunch of damage that way. It ends up pumping out, from my experience, more damage than just Melinoe's aspect, where you can get more of the specials channeled. The explosion is very, very effective. You can be super, super bursty with it, but the problem is the exact same. The special around it is not staggering. You've now got to channel up to an Omega attack to really get like the full effect of the attacks now that are going to explode. Yeah, sure, it's very bursty, but now you've lost all the safety of the aspects. So here, all the same problems apply. You push out more damage, but yeah, safety falls off. And even still, I think, once again, as you get to higher fears, the damage, it doesn't have the same potential as some of these things that are going to be up here in, like, the S tier. If I compare that to, like, the whirlwind effect of any axe, it's just not there. You could just go a basic axe, super basic build, and you're going to end up being in a safer situation that puts out comparable damage and in a full circle around you. So can't really get it above C there. Now, that being said, EOS here. I'm a huge fan of EOS. I'm probably... where do I put this thing? This is real tough. It's right around here, but I definitely think it's better than Pan. Between this and Artemis, whatever, fight me on it. I'm not sure. It's about somewhere there. I might even put it above Charon's. It's very, very, very good. So what it's going to do, its Omega attack is now replaced by this Daybreaker, they call it. So the Daybreaker is going to send out one big ghost that slowly moves around the battlefield, trying to follow enemies around and periodically exploding for a ton of damage. It gets the effects of your attack, but as well, it's going to mimic whatever you do with the special. Here's what I found is the most effective way to play it. Remap, again, if you're playing on controller, remap special from Y to right trigger, which means you're going to have to like remap the hex, and you have to figure something out there. But what you want to do is cast the Daybreaker, you move away at a distance, and then just keep dodging with A and spamming your special, not Omega special, your regular special on the trigger. There's going to be tons of specials all over the battlefield. The Daybreaker does insane damage, especially in rooms that are congested. It's absolutely bonkers. I've managed to beat 40 fear with 60% increased enemies in encounters using EOS and the strategy, just because it's so good at dealing with lots of enemies. Oh, and they also had 30% extra health, so like it just melts, does so much damage. It's so effective. It allows you to keep a distance. Yeah, very, very, very good. One of the problems with it is on bosses, if they move around a lot, so like Kronos, Eris is less of a problem because you can circle around the apples. The Cyclops fight, you often have to recast the Daybreaker quite a lot. And so if you don't have the hammer that reduces the speed of your Omega attacks, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get this recast in and not take damage. But it's going to force you to be like a lot closer in those fights, put yourself into harm's way a lot more often. Still doable, it's still fine, still gets good damage, but it's not like a crazy fast clear against single targets like that. It's more of an AoE thing. So I do think it struggles a bit. You can go 40 fear with something like that, increased health, increased number of encounters, or you could drop both of those and go to 5 minutes. But I don't really see how you do both. I certainly haven't figured it out yet. To be at that 5-minute timer, still do the bosses quickly along with the encounters, I don't know. I don't know what it requires. So that's really what's keeping it from S. As well, one of the things I like about it, it does keep you safe, and I think this is worth noting about the other two wands. These two that want you to charge up the Omega Specials. Anything that wants you to charge up an effect that isn't immediately doing something, so again, like the Axe, where you're immediately doing damage, you're immediately staggering, the time it takes to charge up those Omega Specials, with 40% increased enemy speed, you're getting hit so often. This, if you're just spamming the regular special, you don't bother with that Omega Special. That's a big part of what keeps you safe as well. So another recommendation when using EOS, yeah, just stick to the regular special. Much more effective. And then we got the skulls. Delay for water. I'm dropping this down into D. Probably below the wands. So the Argent Skull aspect of Melinoe, the attacks benefit, right? The attacks end up getting more damage. Your regular attacks are going to be putting out a little bit more damage, and then you're able to pick up your skulls generally through your special somehow. So how this tends to look is like shoot. Your 3 skulls hit, hold down your special, maybe to Omega Special, let go, and you'll sort of dash through, pick up your 3 skulls, and then shoot again. Now there are hammers like the shotgun that can change that a bit, or the automatic collection. The Omega attacks don't really seem that effective, but there's a couple things that really keep this aspect from being great. The first thing, shooting feels like quite slow. There's a pretty big delay on like how long it actually takes to shoot. Most things in this game are so immediate, like most attacks, and for you to get 3 of these out, it's not that fast. And then the second thing, and then they've actually got to like travel and hit and then land for you to pick them up. So you also can't just like spam up close that easily. That's why you tend to need that like special dash with it. The other thing that takes a long time is the Omega Special, and the Omega Special is good, right? You get like great AoE shooting in both directions. You're invincible during the charge of it, like while you're actually acting it out, which is really nice. But the problem once again becomes at that 40% increased enemy speed, the charge up of the Omega Special, you're just a sitting duck and you get hit so often. It's crazy. Shooting those 3 skulls doesn't give you a lot of crowd control for like stunning or anything like that. So maybe you've got like the cast doing something, and then you got to take a second to charge up and then shoot out, and you get like an okay effect from it. Yeah, overall the damage doesn't really seem to be there. Like you're a sitting duck waiting for the Omega Special. And if you want to go any kind of distance with the special, you just have to charge it up, even if you don't go all the way to the Omega. Still, just to get enough distance to get your skulls, it tends to be that way. Unless you got the shotgun thing, you go nice and close, you shoot them all at once. You can probably get away with just a regular special, but it's just sort of fine. It's okay, unimpressive. Yeah, I don't know, not a lot to say about it other than it just kind of on all fronts feels like it falls apart. Still doable. You still can make it work. It's just that's the best way I could put it. Aspect of Medea though. Aspect of Medea. The skull is so bad. Aspect of Medea is probably the best weapon for high fears. Now this is the one weapon on this tier list that I have to defer on. Everything else for me is like, this is how I play it. This is how I feel about it. If I'm piloting this thing, I'm probably somewhere around like the B. But don't look at me for advice. Somebody, and maybe more than one person, have actually cleared this on 50 fear using Medea. And if you watch how they do it so you load the weapon with your regular attack, you charge through people to deal the damage, cause an explosion, and then, you know, do it again and again and again, recollect, that kind of thing. But you're not doing the Omega Special. What it tends to be is like load 1 or 2 of these things, do your quick dash while you're like up close to them, and then you'll pick them back up and then load one and then do it, pick it back up, and like keep going. And you're sort of cycling between the two. Like you're picking up the ones from the last attack on each of them. But they have a nice explosion radius, so you're actually dealing like decent AoE. And the way that it tends to deal damage from the special and then the attack explosion, it does a really good job of those blue hearts, right? The invincibility hearts. You can like strip all of them with the different attacks, which is one of the most difficult things for any aspect to deal with, right? Even something like the Thanatos scythe, you've got to get like 2 kicks from the whirlwind to actually strip 2 blue hearts, and then you can start to stagger, assuming they have no armor. But here you can just load up, you know, 2 skulls. You get the special damage, and then you get the 2 skull damage. The second skull will actually stagger, and then you still have 1 left in reserve to load and then dash with. It's insane. Yeah, I don't know how else to say. It does crazy amounts of damage. You get great control over your character. You can just spam stuff, and it doesn't require a lot of setup. You've got the onion. That's fine. Do you need magic? No, you're never omega attacking or specialing, anything like that. What attack do you want? I mean, whatever's offered, it's okay. Yeah. It absolutely does everything very well. I need to practice more with it so I can actually get my own skill up to taking advantage of this S tier. But go ahead, like, do a search, see people playing with it who are good with it, and yeah, you'll see why this is probably, at least right now, the best weapon for the highest of high fears right now. Next, we've got Persephone. Finish that water. I'm going to put this in C as well. I think above the dagger. So they did change Persephone. So now you're gaining glory through your Omega cast. And you gain a lot more. So what is good about Persephone? During that Omega special, after it's all charged up, or you've got some charge on your glory, you're totally invincible, which the only problem is getting the Omega special off, right? Like I said, you're a sitting duck while you're charging it, but this lets you actually get away from the combat more because you can drive this thing further now. You can drive it up to like 5 seconds or something crazy where you're just like, yeah, zooming around, totally invincible, dealing a bunch of damage. So it's very, very effective while you're in that state. You can also get a hammer to reduce the speed on being able to use that. Yeah, and then the regular attack is just kind of whatever. It's not a big deal. You're basically just wanting to, like, Omega cast, Omega special, Omega cast, Omega special. Like, that's the cycle you're going through. If it was easier to get that Omega special off, if you had, like, better crowd control, you know, the Omega cast is helping you do that by holding people in place, dealing a little bit of damage. Yeah, if it was just a bit faster, then I would definitely bump this up. But right now, I just find, especially if I'm playing on, like, the surface, you've got those skulls shooting at you, you've got any projectiles, even in the very first region in the underworld, right? You got those worms spitting projectiles at you. They'll come at you fast, and it's very, very hard to get that charged up. So, yeah, the best way to play it is just build those two up, the cast and the special, and then just try to be as in that invincible state for as long as possible. Take advantage of it. You can get some decent damage. It's okay. But yeah, I think just a very dangerous aspect when you're not there. Doesn't benefit that much from the attack. Probably not much more to say that I haven't already said here for the Melinoe aspect. So let's go to staffs. Melinoe's staff, I'm plopping down in B. So Melinoe's staff, you're going to get reduced cast time on your Omegas, and that's really, really great for the attack. You can make it work with the cast as well. I think the special, not great. If you're forced into a hammer to take advantage of the special, fine. You know, you might use it every now and then. but I really don't think it's worth building around at all. But the cast can be good if you've got something like Poseidon's cast, and the attack is good with just about anything. I was going to say I'd recommend avoiding Aphrodite for safety, but there's actually builds where you don't even need the Omega cast, or the Omega attack. You can just go Aphrodite's basic attack with this weapon, and do some pretty crazy things, so that's another option. But if you're wanting to take advantage of those Omega attacks, just about anything is fine. The reduced cast time, it helps with the problem I was just talking about. You can get off your Omega attacks in a way that's safe. It's got amazing range on it, so you don't actually have to like get close to take advantage of it. It's super good in boss fights. Against Eris, you can just like hide behind those pillars and shoot. Against Kronos, he's got a lot of states where he's just sitting in one spot, you know, doing a bunch of crazy casting shit, and you can just blast him again and again and again. The only thing is you need some way of keeping your magic high. So something like Born Gain is insane. I'm expecting it to be nerfed in this next patch. We'll see if that happens. It does make it a little bit more difficult, but even then, just keeping your magic high through pots that you're picking up throughout the run, or something like, yeah, Hearth Gain. You can get away with some of the others. Demeter's is probably fine, even Apollo's. There are ways to kind of make it work and still be able to spam that Omega attack very safely. The thing that keeps it from being any higher, its damage potential isn't super high. The hammers are quite good. Cross Cataclysm's going to get you an extra 50%. That's very good. If you can get Weed Killer is a very good boon to target with this. Going to make it a lot stronger. And then you can even get the I forget what it's called, but the double shot. You'll end up taking more damage, but you'll shoot it twice as fast, basically. That's a lot of damage potential there. But for the most part, you're spending a lot of magic to deal an okay amount of damage in a straight line. It's nothing to scoff at, but it doesn't have the same kind of like insane burst as like you're targeting one person with Pan, or you've got like these huge crits off of Thanatos, or you're, you know, charging through and exploding constantly with Medea here. It's good, solid damage. Yeah, very comparable to something like the Axe's base kit. It's fine. Pretty good aspect to go through 32 with. I think you can start to push upwards of like 40, and then it kind of starts to fall off after that. So solid choice, but yeah, wouldn't be my number one. Circe. Circe, I got to put somewhere down here. High D, I don't know. Where in the third pile does it sit? It's fine. The reason it's kind of fine, and I could almost maybe move it up to C, is mostly what I just talked about there with Aphrodite. You can build the staff in such a way that it's just a decent base kit. You go for fast attacks. You're attacking close and quickly with something like Aphrodite, and yeah, maybe every now and then using an Omega attack. It's fine, I guess. But its whole kit of Serenity, where you're trying to get 11 attacks in, either attacks or specials, regular of either, and then you're going to end up dealing a whole bunch of extra Omega damage for a small burst. It's a lot to invest in as you get to those higher fears. Higher fears, now you've got the Onion, now you're priming magic, you've got less selection, and now you're telling me I want to get my attack and or special good, and I have to make sure my Omegas are good, and you know, if I'm getting my specials because they're faster, let's say, increased, well, now I need my Omega attack because that's the better one to also have a good boon. So they're competing for palms and things like that. Plus, you're only getting maybe like 3-4 Omega attacks off during Serenity, where it gets increased damage anyway. What I think you're really comparing to get a good idea of this aspect is, what if I just spam regular Omega attacks with Melinoe Staff versus use 11 shitty attacks, then use Serenity like 4 times, and then go back to your crappy attacks again? what is the damage potential. And I think in most cases, and it's just easier to navigate, Melinoe's just spamming the Omega attacks, even without the bonus speed, is just better. And that's, yeah, you can get the hammers that increase your Omega attack damage, Weed Killer, and things like that anyway. So you can just make that sort of base damage pretty good. It just doesn't quite end up working. The one thing that it has for it that's okay is if you take some of those abilities that are going to, prime your magic, something like that, it does have a way of now regenerating your magic. So you can get away from picking a gain ability. You could choose to start a room with 0% of your magic bar filled. I don't know. You can make that work with the Huntress, or you can start a room, spam your Omegas until you're down to 0, and then try to charge it up with Serenity and spam them again. I think they're about equivalent. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility in that case, but just being forced to do that kind of back and forth, generally speaking, you're losing out on damage as compared to just spamming it here with Melinoe Staff. So it's just going to fall short as the timer gets reduced, as enemy health goes up, as there are more enemies in a room, that kind of thing. So it's doable. It feels like it's in a way better spot than it was before. You know, part of me is like, do I drag it up to C here? Maybe, but we'll keep it in D just to keep it nice and spicy. Finally, we got Momus, and Momus has been changed a lot. I'm going to drop Momus into A. Now, where in A? I would probably put it above Pan. Ooh, do I put it above Artemis? Very close. Let's do something like that. I don't really know. I think when they're in this kind of same tier, it gets very hard. I'll put it about there. This is a very congested place, I would say. But Momus, you're going to be able to use your Omega moves and have them repeat like 3 times, right? As you do it, they'll repeat like 3 times, and so you drop them as kind of stationary turrets. So Momus, now in the state that it's in, is so good at doing what Eos does, which is clearing out rooms with lots of enemies, right? These congested regular encounters. I was able to do 40 on the surface with it as well. The casts are great. The Omega attack is great. The Omega special, pretty lackluster, but a lot of times you can just weave it in as a bit of extra damage. It's one of those things where, yeah, it requires a lot of boons to really reach its maximum potential, but the nice thing is any boon you get along the way is going to help you somehow. Is it for the cast or the attack or the special? Doesn't matter. Does it help? Yeah, with magic, everything is good. So I think the only knock against it is it's very hard to deal lots of damage in a short amount of time. I think the time constraint is the big knock. It's okay in boss fights. It's like pretty good damage in boss fights. It's quite good damage in those regular rooms, but the same problem I've talked about before, charging up those Omega moves. You're always having to charge up again and again and again, and it's a time-consuming thing to have all these like turrets down and shooting. So even if it's got that damage potential, it's just very hard to do it fast. I don't see it right now breaking into that S tier for that reason. It just, yeah, it seems to be capped a little bit, but very strong. It's really good for 32. I think it's a very easy aspect to run at 32. I think it's good to push like 40, and I think it can push to, 45 even, something like that maybe. I don't know where it really starts to feel that drop off. I'll have to play with it more to see. But a lot of potential there. Yeah, does quite well. And I think that pretty much covers it. So, tons of thoughts on all these things. There's probably a lot of stuff I didn't even have time to talk about. I see we're up at close to 45 minutes now. Curious to hear what other people have to say. But again, this is for 32 Fear and beyond. Pretty confident it's at least pretty close. As some of these things could maybe be shuffled ever so slightly. But yeah, curious to hear what you think. And I think this would be a good reference if you're looking to tackle 32 Fear and beyond.